Welcome to the MTD podcast. I'm Giovanni Albanese, hosting today's show, a passionate engineer and a very proud member of the MTD team. It's a privilege to be at the headquarters of Leader CNC Technologies today, based in Nuneaton, a leading supplier of machine tools and technology. Today we're looking to the journey of an engineering legend within our industry and discuss the ever-evolving landscape of engineering. I'm joined by two special guests. Firstly, Mike Serzeniewski.
Very good. 9 out of 10.
Mike, welcome to the show. An engineering legend with a career dating back to 1965, starting as an apprentice at Cincinnati Machine Tools and now sales director at Leader CNC Technologies. Hi, Mike, and thank you very much for having us in today.
No, you're welcome, Gio. I'm pleased to be here.
It's
not just as I've spoken to anybody, but there we go. We'll have a go.
We also have the pleasure to be joined by Paul Jones, an industry leader, an influencer, and the founder and managing director of MTDCNC. Paul started his engineering career at Rolls-Royce and then moved into machine tool sales for leading machine tool suppliers before starting up MTDCNC in 2007, I believe, Paul.
2007, yeah. 14 years ago now.
Wow.
Incredible. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's gone fast.
But I'm good. Yeah, Gio, nice to see you. And Mike, good to be here doing this podcast with you. Looking forward to finding out more about your journey in engineering.
That's been a long one. not the end yet.
Still plenty of time to go.
Well, I don't know about the plenty, but there is still some time to go, yeah.
Well, Mike, you started in 1965 at Cincinnati. Can you kind of tell our listeners, firstly, why you got into engineering? What attracted you to engineering?
I suppose my father was a school teacher, so he was sort of on the academic side, and he made me do things like Latin and history, which I detested. And I wasn't very good at it, and I got very low marks. I was always quite practical, so I thought I'd have a go at engineering. And so rather than go through the university, when I left school, I was brought up in Gloucestershire, in the nice country village. Engineering was a good way to go. So I thought I'd have a go to an engineering apprenticeship. And I joined Cincinnati in mid-60s, yeah.
Were they making the machines there?
Yes, they were building the machines there. I did a 5-year apprenticeship, which is a technical apprenticeship, which included everything that they do in apprentices, going through the machine build, through the
Did you do all like the hand scraping and stuff like that?
Oh, absolutely. You did all the mundane tasks like having to file little blocks square and things like that, and cutting your fingers open on a manual lathe and radial drills. But it was very, very good grounding because I found that unless you have a good basic knowledge of things, it's very difficult to progress. You can pick things up academically, but you need a hands-on approach.
What was it like back in the factory? I say all those years ago, but back then, did they have all the? I mean, one of the things I always remember is going through my apprenticeship is always being the butt of all the jokes, or was it the same for you? Or was it even worse back?
No. I mean, you used to have this normal things that they do to apprentices and send you to the stores for a box of Sparks and the long wait and all of these things. I think that's fairly standard throughout industry.
It still happens, probably.
It still happens. But I think, all in all, I enjoyed my apprenticeship. I did an HND. I've never been to university, but I thought I'd do an engineering degree. And then I did a lot of practical courses on electronics and things like that, which I found very useful. But the apprenticeship was very, very good. 5 years, learnt a lot.
It's a good grounding, isn't it? I mean, we have apprentices at our company these days. I know it's a different field in digital marketing, but their apprenticeships are only one year. Can you learn enough in 1 year to consider that to be an apprenticeship completed? I just think I remember mine was actually 4 years, but every year you felt you'd learned something the year before and you stepped into the next level of education. So, it was a really good grounding.
Yeah, 4 years, same with me, Mike, a 4-year apprenticeship. And I was actually using a Cincinnati at CD Atkinson Engineering at the time. It was a manual horizontal harbour Cincinnati. I mean, it was all manual machines back then, wasn't it, Mike?
I probably built it then. I feel sorry for some of the lads now and again because we don't have a build industry anymore now. So it's not had its knock-on effect. If you don't learn the basic skills, how can you then progress?
Well, when I first went into selling machines in 2001, I worked for what was Bridgeport back in Leicester. And part of my training to go into sales was to spend 6 weeks on the shop floor going through every stage of building and preparing the machines for delivery. So that was before they sent me out on the road to go. They wanted me to have a full understanding of how a machine went together, what the features and or what went into making a machine in Leicester, which was so important in the sales process. Can't imagine that ever happening now.
It doesn't happen now because we don't have a machine tool industry as such. And that has its knock-on effect because we don't build anymore. That has a longer knock-on effect because people who used to build the machines learned how to build them, service them, and so on. You don't get that now.
So, like Mike, back in the day in 1965, it was all manual machines. Tell us about your journey and how these machine tools have evolved over the years.
Well, we started off obviously building the bed-type mills, the Powermatics, and the knee and column type machines, and then it slowly progressed. It started with plugboard controls. Then it went through the machines, NC, and it was a very slow evolution, really. I found it very, very interesting. So,
I thought it was when I came here today. I haven't been back to Leader CNC for probably a couple of years, and it's always good to come back and see all you guys. I went to make a cup of tea a minute ago, and on one of the sides of the cupboards, as you open the cupboards, it's got all of the people that work here and how they take their tea or coffee. How many sugars do you think Mike has?
3.
4.
No,
he doesn't know. But there is one guy on there. He has 4 sugars. I think.
Well, have you seen his cup though?
and have you seen his teeth?
Yeah. No, I have a lot of caffeine in the morning, water in the afternoon. But basically, the machines haven't changed. If you look at the machines, you still have cast beds. The controls have changed. That's the biggest thing on machine tools. Before it used to be cams and racks and pinions and things like that. Then it went into pneumatics and hydraulics and plugboard controls. But it's the controls really that's made a difference.
Are the machines better these days than they were all those years ago? Will they last longer? And if so, why? Or why not?
I think the machines were virtually hand-built because there was no mass production as such. They did have a very big machine shop at Cincinnati, but the machines were still hand-built. That's obviously, when you hand scrape and you assemble, you obviously take more care. The only thing is you get a lot more repeatability now because things are mass-produced in China and Japan and everywhere like that. So you can just change bits.
But it amazes me when you look at how much machines cost in years gone by. And when you compare them to what they cost now, like a vertical machining centre would probably have cost more back in 1975 than it might do these days. But I suppose that comes down to everything that you're talking about, the labour going into it, the way they're built.
The mass production. The
industry changes, yeah.
Why did it stop the industry, the machine tool industry building in the UK, Mike, in your opinion? Was it down to cost?
I think it's Japanese. As soon as NC came out, as soon as they brought out the fan controls, that was the biggest influence, without a shadow of a doubt. When the fan controls came out, the people over here who were traditionally using the old methods couldn't understand it. And I think that was the biggest thing in those days. You as a builder were the expert. And when we started bringing in the Japanese machine tools, we were the experts. People were still using manual machines. So sales were relatively easy in those days. It was the engineering that was hard. I think that's turned the other way now, where the engineering is relatively easy on machine tools with modern diagnostics and things like that. Obviously, the way people buy machines are different. But now people are far more aware. You're now trying to sell to an audience and know more about CNC.
Can you remember the first machine you sold?
The first machine I sold wasn't actually for Cincinnati because I was never on sales at Cincinnati. when I finished, towards the end of my apprenticeship, I did a lot of time in the showroom, and I was an application engineer, so I was doing programming and running the parts off, doing part programs, assembling, tooling, and so on. That then led me on to working at exhibitions. So I was a demonstrator and started to install machines at all the exhibitions. And this was for a fairly worldwide basis. That got me more interested into the service side of it. And I think because I'd been building and applying the machines, and I'd seen some of the machines being installed, that I thought, I could have a go at fixing these machines. So I went on product service for Cincinnati, and that was on the Cincinnati turret mills and things like that. But it was very, very different to what it is now. We were on product service, and because we were building the machines, actually, we were the experts. We had dealers all over the world, but they didn't really know the machines. The machines were factory built. So not only did you have to learn the mechanical build, you had to learn the hydraulics, the pneumatic circuits, you had to learn the CNC controls, and I spent many years at Biggleswade learning the achromatic controls, doing the transistor logic, because when you were on product service, which is actually my most, of all the jobs I've done, I think doing the engineering and product service was, from an engineering point of view, my most rewarding jobs.
I mean, the experience that you've had is astounding.
It's second to none. There's a lot more pressure because if you can imagine, if in those days on service, we were called all over the world. So I was visiting China and India and Korea and South Africa and all of these places.
And this was all Cincinnati?
This was all Cincinnati, yes. But because the dealers didn't know very much, you were the experts. Everything was different then. There were no mobile phones. There was no sat-nav. So when somebody said to you, here's 3 jobs to do in Europe, they used to say, well, here's your 3 jobs, get in the car and go and do the job. So you had the language problem. You had to do everything, organise yourself. There was nobody to call on from the office because you were the expert. You were the factory man.
What year are we talking about here, roughly?
You're probably talking of late 70s, 70s, 76, 77, 75 to 78.
I was just born then, Mike.
I was still a twinkle in there. What happened to Cincinnati? I grew up like Geo using Cincinnati machines. When I first was selling machine tools, they were still everywhere, but gradually they've kind of been weeded out of industry. What happened to the business?
I think they tried to diversify too much. When they were building machining centres, they were very, very good. Then they got into robotics, and then they started to dabble into automation. This was before the days when people started talking about FMS and things like that. And a lot of it was transferred over to the USA, a lot of the control. And it just slowly drifted apart. And it's happened not only to Cincinnati. If you look at Wickman's and all of the people in the UK, Broadbents and all of these people, everybody went down the same path.
Paul, what are the biggest changes that you've seen? Because you've been involved in machine tools a lot more than me. And Bridgeport, it was a massive company back then. A lot of the sales directors and engineers that you see now, for a lot of the other OEM companies, all originated from Bridgeport.
It did, yeah. Even as far as contacts that we have with Tony in the States, I was there in 2001 until 2003, and I have to say, for the record, I think there was some real frailties in the way that business was run as an organisation. I think the product was good, it was solid, it was reliable. But as with all these things, competition creeps in from overseas. It's cheaper. it's readily available stock, the lack of flexibility on a commercial element from some of the hierarchy at Bridgeport then just meant that it just became quite a difficult business to work for, and the product was facing tough times because of competition. And I think that that's probably a trend that's happened in industry since then over the last 2 decades, where we've seen companies and new products coming into the UK market that initially may have lacked in reliability and quality, but over the last 2 decades, some of those things have been ironed out. And now you've got some tremendously good bits of kit that can be coming in from overseas, but at the same time, there's a lot more than just the plant. It's the company, it's the support. I mean, one of the things I think is great here, Mike, is speaking with you and Rob and Steve earlier. I mean, you have got decades of engineering, resource and expertise behind you, haven't you? So, and selling machine tools is one thing, but everything that goes along with it, people are leaning on. I suppose where I'm drifting to, Gio, in answer to your question, is people these days don't have the production engineers that they did. They don't have the infrastructure in their machine shops that they did. They're reliant on businesses that can not only sell them a bit of kit, but can help them through, the journey of making that a successful purchase.
I think the other thing is my first job in sales was at TI Polmac, and that was a joint venture between Tube Investments and Metal Export. And we were trying to sell Polish machine tools in the UK. And doing a bit of name dropping, I worked with Tom Hughes. He was at TI Polmac as well. He's now at White House, of course. And we were quite naive. We were very, very naive. And we thought sales were easy. We spent a lot of time sort of drinking vodka and going to Poland and things like that. But it was different because it was reciprocal trade deals. Ursus were building a factory over there, and we were representing people like Cross, Landis, Delapina. So we were promoting British business over there, and on a reciprocal basis selling over here. And we sold some really good plants. I remember putting in a Paribas lathe at Summers Forge, and that's still running now. And that's over 35 years ago. That was a big 20-metre machine. So, but I think because I was on sales and quite naive, what I learned was you could put a machine in, but then, as you rightly point out, you needed to back it up. And I think engineering, you have to go back to engineering and back up. That is why we're quite successful at Leader CNC. We're probably one of the best machine tool sales companies that people haven't heard of, because we're better known for our after-sale service. We don't sell in volume. We sell solutions, which is again what you were saying. People haven't had the mentors, they haven't had the expertise, they haven't had the experience.
Well, it's that looking at a part, isn't it? We always say it's looking at a part. How can you possibly begin to try and sell a machine to someone if you can't look at that part and think, how would I make that? How would I make that? What's the best possible way to make that? Imagine I owned that company. Imagine I wanted to win that business. What is the best machine that I can use to make that component? And I think if you haven't got that mentality and that interest, then you're never going to succeed as either an individual or a business, I don't believe.
But I think what you've got to have, you've not only got to have the product knowledge, you've got to know the different markets and you've got to know automation. I left TI Polmac because sees the writing on the wall, because it was a time when Matrix Churchill and Paul Henderson and the crew were going through a bit of a rough patch, and Steve Britton, who I know very well. So discretion being a better part of it, I joined Sanout Machine Tools. And we were selling Mandelli and Berthier, Favretto and all of these well-known makes, real quality stuff.
I remember Mandelli. I used to have one of those in, I used to work at W.H. Allen's or Rolls-Royce in Bedford.
W.H. Allen. I probably sold that machine.
Did you, Mandelli? Yeah, I remember it working, yeah. Yeah, I remember the guy that used to work it as well. He used to play football with his son, yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. And I think because you have this broad knowledge of turning machines and grinding machines, big machines, small machines, that all puts you in good stead, because everything's a learning curve. I mean, I still learn things every day. But you're absolutely right. People don't want to buy. Selling has changed so dramatically. because we were trying to sell before to people who weren't aware of what CNC does. Everybody's aware of CNC now. So when you go into a plant, some of the people have got more knowledge about their specific sector than you've got. So you've got to then stand back and say, well, how can I apply what I've learned somewhere else to here? And that's always a good thing. I always do the same as you mentioned, Paul. I walk into a place and I never walk in with a brochure. I never go in to try and sell a machine. I'll go in and say, what do you want to make? Show me what you want to make.
Money. They say money.
Well, that's what pays the wages, isn't it, at the end of the day? But people are also tend to go down a rut. People have always made things the same way, never think outside the box. We've been in places where people have said, I want to buy a 5-axis machine. And you look at a part and you go, well, really what you could do with a lathe and a machining centre. You don't really want a 5-axis machine. And you're given the reasons why. And generally, they listen to you. They don't always buy things, but at least they listen to you.
So Mike, in 2002, you become sales director for Leader CNC Technologies.
Yeah.
Tell us about this.
Well, it was a bit of a transition because after I left Stanhope, I did a lot in automation, and I worked for a company that did automation, robotics, and we put systems in, BAE systems and all sorts of places like that. So I had a fairly good background knowledge of automated handling and also various types of machine tools. And what Paul was saying was absolutely right. People like good engineering. When I joined Rob, before I joined Leader CNC, Rob and myself worked for RPD Machine Services. That's going back 1996. So I've known Rob for a long, long time. And he ran the engineering side and I was sales director. And it was primarily an engineering company. And then we latched onto Toshiba Sales. That went on for a few years, and because of the shareholding at RPD, it sort of drifted apart for various reasons. And Rob left to set up Leader CNC Technologies with 3 of the engineers who I had working with him. And Rob's always been passionate about engineering, and he's an excellent engineer. I've got a lot of time for that. I stayed on with Toshiba as sales director for what was then Stevens International, because I wasn't a service engineer anymore. I wouldn't have been very good working with Rob because we had nothing to sell, because Toshiba was still with Stevens International. And there were a few ructions backwards and forwards. And then there was a time when Toshiba and Hitachi came together, Toshiba tried to bail Hitachi out, and I joined Mike Legg and I worked with, it was Steve Finn who was there, and some well-known names.
Yeah.
So I stayed with the product. Then after a few years, Robert got himself established. He'd got everything running at Leader CNC, and by some miracle, myself and Toshiba found its way back to Leader CNC.
Miracles happen.
So it's shan't go into the story. It's quite convoluted, and but yeah. So I joined Rob back in 2002. So I've been
So
here.
you've enjoyed 2 decades here at the business, almost.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Highlights of that?
Highlights of that, we've had some really excellent years, and we've had some really rough years, because that's a thing. If you're selling volume commodity machines, which we don't do, you suffer very much with peaks and troughs. So when things are doing well in manufacturing industry, you can make some really good machine sales, both in volume and in cash terms. We don't compete with the volume commodity machines because we don't have a big showroom full of 6-inch chucking lathes and vertical and small vertical machining centres and little grinders. We try to concentrate on the bigger stuff. So that's where we are at the moment. So I've enjoyed every moment of it. We've sold some really big machines, and it's nice when other manufacturers approach you to take on their agencies because of your engineering expertise, and say, not mine, this is Leader CNC. We were approached by Kitamura, and we took them on for a while, and we parted our ways since. And they went through rough days, and we had to drag it back from 0 sales and with their problems back to quite successfully selling quite a few machines. The same just happened with Nomura. We took on the sliders to give us a portfolio. Never sold anything. We've now sold some Nomura sliders. We took on Toyota, and we got an order for a Toyota last week. And these are people who have been trying to sell machines through Grupo Parpas as well. They were with another dealer for many, many years. No sales in the UK. And as you know, because you've seen some installations now, we've managed to sell a few Parpas machines, which goes to show it's not the machine tools themselves. It's how you sell them and how you back them up that matters.
So Mike, you mentioned earlier on in this podcast about you're a solutions provider. You're not just selling machine tools. Give us, or our listeners, some examples of this, of how you've solved problems and solutions that you've provided.
Well, if you take sort of a mixture of automation and machine tools, we sold quite a few machines to a company called VTL in Huddersfield. They were making parts for Jaguar Land Rover, the i4 and the i6 engines, where they had a problem where they had to maple ream long holes up to 600 millimetres long, and they were trying to do it horizontally. Well, as you know, things tend to drop. But trying to change auto tool change and ream with a 600 mil tool is not easy. There were no machines that we could find anywhere, but fortunately we had DMC. DMC, as you know, they're a machine tool builder who
I saw this
traditionally built. We spoke about this morning. So we went to DMC and said, we want a machine to do this. And they said, yeah, we can have one of you. We can take one of our verticals. We can take the base off. We could put a trunnion down on it, which we've resourced in the UK. And we then put in 3 machines in a cell, 3 or 4 machines in a cell with a robot automatically loading and unloading parts.
I remember seeing the solution going through the workshop here actually some years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Something to do with the DMC with a huge long boring bar, yeah.
That's right. And because the machine was adapted, again, we sold people what they needed. We could have just said, okay, we'll sell you a horizontal machining centre, but it's not really the right way to do the job. So you engineer your way around it. If you're trying to sell out of a brochure and out of a showroom, it's difficult to do that because you haven't got the engineering expertise or the place or the resources to do it. And we have that at Leader CNC.
The Toshiba's a big one. We've seen quite a lot of these VTLs around. You do well with them, don't you?
They're
quite heavy industry in a lot of these pump casings and all,
they're magic machines. They are. I mean, Toshiba have been going for, many years. It's now Shibura machines. They've got their own foundry. They've got their own machine shop. They've got a proven track record. And when people look at VTLs, or when people look at the name Toshiba is now Shibura, they go, well, yeah, but they're expensive. They're Japanese. They're not, because they now build them in volumes. Obviously, we try to get them a bit quicker. But yeah, the VTLs are probably our best Shibura seller.
I'm thinking 2 companies, T's Components, Desmond Engineering. You got machines in those 2, haven't you?
Yes, we installed another one last week in AM Hydraulics.
Did you? Oh, yeah.
A brand new one, 200S as well. So we're still selling them.
Yeah.
The machine is out in the showroom. That's been sold as well now. We're waiting for that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And with these bespoke solutions and being a solutions provider, is that where you get your joy from in engineering, Mike? You're not just selling a box, if you like. You're actually selling that solution and it's a turnkey package.
And I think that's the route we've been forced down, to be honest with you. You can't really offer a machine without teaching people how to use it properly. There's a lot of people out there. If you take now, a lot of people using CAD/CAM, and there's a lot of good graduates out there. There's a lot of expertise out there, but pure 5-axis is relatively new. So if you go to a place and say, right, okay, what do you want to make? And it's this component, you've then got to try and say, okay, we'll give you a solution. So I've lost my train of thought a little bit here.
But that's where a lot of the enjoyment comes from, Mike.
It is. It's a satisfaction of going in there and saying, look, you've always done it that way. Here's a better way of doing it. Here's a machine for doing it. And here's a method of doing it. And we'll do the fixtures for you. We'll do the tooling. We'll do the programs. And
I think that's always the curiosity of an engineer, isn't it? It is analysing and looking and trying to make something a little bit better, trying to make it a little bit quicker, trying to make it maybe in a different way. That's how we all tick and all work, I think. And
I think that's a good engineer. To me, a good engineer has to listen, learn, observe, and then apply that knowledge to solving somebody's solution. And you can't do that from a brochure. You can't do that from a book.
It's impossible. Yeah, and there's so many different ways to skin a cat, isn't there? You can make the component in so many different ways, but it's finding the best solution for that application.
Yeah, and I was picks up my train of thought again. If you take the advances in tooling, there's a lot of modern cutting tools now where people are on linear speed, fast linear speeds and applications and things like that. 200 bar coolant.
Strategies, isn't it?
You can sit behind a desk and you can design. You can write a part program. You can design something, but a lot of the people who production engineers who try to back up or sit in an office doing these things, they haven't had the practical experience. You can design something, but then you say to these people, well, this is aluminium, or this is titanium, or this is duplex, and you know what sort of swarf you're going to produce and things like that. It's fine though in the theory, but it's only by, I suppose, going round for many, many years, looking at the applications and different ways of people who've got different doing the jobs.
Yeah.
That's how you learn.
Yeah, I completely agree 100%. And Mike, where do you see the future of engineering, not just in the UK but around the world? I know you've also got the Takumi range, and they've got the additive manufacturing machine tool now as well.
Well, I think additive will come into it. I mean, Shibor have got one of the biggest additive machines. They've actually done a whole engine casing for a well-known engine manufacturer. And that's going through trials. There's a lot of things that are going to composites as well. And again, Parpas do a lot of that. So then you've got additive, you've got lasers, you've got wires. I think manufacturing is going to change because if you go back, 10, 20, 30 years ago, everything was big and massive and heavy. It isn't now. Everything is now for lightweight and speed.
I'm still big and heavy. Does that
getting bigger and heavier every day?
Yeah,
he is what you're talking about then, Mike, isn't he? He's small, compact, light,
streamlined.
Yeah, streamlined. So he's the future.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of mileage in engineering. But I think gone are the days. You can't sell from a brochure anymore now. I think those days are gone. If you're selling commodity machines and you've got lots of stock and no price list, you can always install machines places. But the beauty is, there's a great satisfaction in selling something for £1 million and getting it right.
Yeah.
And we'd rather, at Leader CNC, we would rather sell one machine a month. Well, hopefully more than that. But if we can sell a machine a month, rather than sell 30 little ones, we know what we'd rather do. It gives the engineers plenty to do. It takes a long time to install these things, of course, which is another thing. We've got good service engineers, but I think Bob Turnell, I was talking to him the other day, our Northern Air sales manager, and he worked out per capita, if you look at the number of machines that we sell and install and the number of engineers we haven't got as many engineers as some other people. But if you look at the volume of our installations against our engineers per capita, we're actually better than most people because we don't need to have 20 service engineers installing 50 machines a month.
Yeah, Mike, it's a good point. And just to kind of summarise, really, what you're saying is the game has changed, so we need to change the way in which we play the game.
Everything changed. I mean, you can tell from my age, I'm not a IT social media expert. That's why we've got Emma.
You're getting quite good, actually. I was seeing you quite a bit on LinkedIn recently, Mike.
Well, LinkedIn. I've been told to go down by my path by my superior, Emma. She's my marketing lady. She's really good.
She did a good job.
But when it comes to she does all the websites and e-shots and things like that. Again, that's the way it's going to go, isn't it? People are going to go for e-shots and selling platforms like MTD, videos, LinkedIn. I mean, when it comes to social media, I mean, I've never been on Instagram. I've never used Twitter. I've never used TikTok. No, never. No, I haven't, because I've got no need to do that, really. But you've heard of it, though? You've heard of it? I've heard of it because of my grandkids tell me.
Yeah.
Just to keep using it. Back to the dinosaur days. But I think the way the method of selling is changing, machine tools are changing, but I think there's a lot to go in manufacturing industry yet. I think it'll change, but hopefully for the better.
Well, Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure to get an insight into your background and your journey in engineering. It's been a privilege for us to be here at Leader CNC Technologies today. I hope the listeners have really enjoyed this podcast. And if they've got any questions at all, please contact Leader CNC directly. Paul, any last thoughts?
No, it's just been really good to see you, Mike. And I wanted to wish you a belated happy birthday for your birthday, which I believe was a week or two ago.
You're not going to tell people how old I am? Okay.
74, not looking a day older.
No, to me, retirement is too final. It's a bit like death, but less permanent.
You obviously enjoy what you do, Mike. I do. And thanks so much for joining us on this podcast.
No problem at all.
Until next week, the MTD podcast. We've been joined by a real engineering legend today. It's been an absolute privilege. Next week, another episode of the MTD podcast. Stay tuned.
Thanks for listening to the MTD podcast. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. Find more episodes on mtdcnc.com.